Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are watching this from. Welcome back to Facing Reality. It's me, January, and today we are continuing the trial of Mark Redwine. Today we have Dylan's mom, Elaine Hall, on the stand. And before we get right into her testimony, I wanted to play for you guys a clip. This is an interview that Elaine did once Dylan's remains were found and the medical examiner ruled it as a homicide. And so this is the interview that she did in regards to that. This was the day that she found out that Mark Redwine, her ex-husband, was a person of interest or considered to be a suspect. Now, all the while, Elaine had said from day one that she suspected Mark, that she suspected something fishy, something funny was going on. Good morning, Queen Petty. Great to see you today. I hope you're doing well. She had feelings about Mark in these ways. She knew that he had violent tendencies. We've talked in previous days, and if you haven't watched any of the other days, they're in the playlist on my channel here called Dylan Redwine. We talked about, did Elaine know about those those photos of Mark Redwine? We don't know. She never really said anything about it. However, she suspected him from day one. She said, the second she got a text message from Mark. Now, mind you, she puts her son on an airplane, her 13-year-old son, who did not want to go be with his dad. She puts him on an airplane and sends him, almost 6 hours away. The plane ride wasn't 6 hours, but almost 6 hours away. And then she gets a text from the dad, not very long, few hours, literally. It's not even been 24 hours, saying, have you seen Dylan? You know where he's at? And she's like, it's really concerning to me, Mark, that our son is with you. I put him on a plane and sent him to you. And damn good and well, I don't know where he's at, So I am doing well. It's okay. It's okay. It's summertime, girl. It's all right. Catch the replay and you can always rewind. No big deal. I just appreciate your love and support. All right, let's watch this interview here. And let me get me all off of here. If you guys haven't done so already, if you don't mind, hit that like button. That really helps get the word out about Dylan. That's why we're all here. We want people to know his story. And also, I want you guys to share this stuff with people so people can recognize these monsters that are in their lives. Here we go, guys.
Elaine, thank you so much for talking with us today. Can you just run us through what today has been like for you?
Today was a good day in the journey for justice for Dylan. I've been very vocal in the very beginning about my opinion of Mark's involvement in Dylan's case, and Dylan being missing, and then, of course, ultimately Dylan being murdered. And I've always believed and still believe that Mark was responsible. So today was a good day for the journey for justice.
What's the next step for you?
We're just going to keep doing what we've been doing, and that is collaborating with law enforcement and, continue to working towards the ultimate goal.
The ultimate goal
Of the person who took Dylan's life needs to be held responsible for the murder of my son.
So when you found out today that Mark had been named a person of interest?
Yes.
And what was that like for you?
It was, for me, it was, I told you so, but it was encouraging that we were actually here. It seems like it's been, and it has been, many years, too many years, and a lot's transpired from the time Dylan went missing until today. So I was happy.
What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, like I said, we're just going to keep going down the same road we've been going down, and continue to fight the same fight that we've been fighting, and still work with law enforcement and the other players that are involved in this game.
How closely has law enforcement been working with you? Have they been keeping you updated every time they have a new lead, or have you been kind of finding things out as we've been finding things out?
I work very closely with law enforcement.
As your son's investigation continues, so many people, searchers, etc., were part of that initial, push to find Dylan. What message would you have to those people as this case, as this investigation, as the search for answers continues to evolve?
Everybody asks me that, and really all I can say is thank you. I'd love to hug each and every one of them, but obviously I can't do that. I just appreciate their support, their tenacity, not giving up on us, not giving up on Dylan. We couldn't have done this as a family without them.
How do you deal with this as a family? Because this is so emotional. How do you internalize and then deal with your husband, deal with everyone around you, and deal with this day to day as you continue to learn new things and sometimes have to wait to learn new things?
We support each other just as Dylan would want us to, and we're a stronger family now than we ever were, and we do this because of Dylan.
For other families who don't have answers to their children's disappearances, what would you say to them to bolster their strength as you continue to learn new answers?
Keep fighting. You cannot give up. Even when that road ahead looks so bleak and you feel like you're never going to get anywhere, you're never getting anywhere, don't give up. You have to keep fighting, because if you don't fight, no one else is going to.
And is there anything else you'd like to add? Because we appreciate the fact that you've allowed us into your home, allowed us into your lives for this long a period in the search for answers for your son Dylan's disappearance.
I just, again, like to say thank you, and how much I appreciate everybody who's really joined in this journey. Regardless of what your opinions are, everybody has been, very supportive and really reached out and done a lot of things that I may never have said thank you for at that time. But everybody's support and perseverance has really helped us get where we are today. And so thank you.
And thank you so much. That was Elaine Hall, Dylan Redwine's mother, talking about the change of events with regards to his investigation. And that concludes our live stream on Gazette.com. I'm Eric Singer, along with Gazette reporter Cassandra Cluse. Thank you. And of course, you can read more of Cassandra's story about the search for answers in the Gazette and on Gazette.com. We end now our live stream.
All right. Couple things in regards to that video. One reason why I really wanted to play it is we have some missing children currently right now that have been missing for a couple years now. And, just as a little bit of hope, maybe, one mom that comes to mind is Brandy Neal, Michael Joseph Vaughn's mom. Hang in there, hun, because we'll get justice. We will find Michael one way, shape, or form. So this live stream's about Dylan, and we're going to get right into the testimony of his mom. This took a toll on her big time, guys. That interview that we just watched, that was in 2015. Now, her son went missing in 2012. So that was 3 years later. It's wearing on her. You can see it in her face. You can hear it in her voice. And then keep in mind, Mark Redwine didn't go to trial until 2021. So this took a long time. That mama is patient, let me tell you, because I'd have probably done, whether it be myself or him or all of them, or I don't know, but she's better than me for real. Okay, let's get into it. I do apologize for us not being able to see the videos very well yesterday. I don't know what was going on my end as far as any of the what's the word I'm looking for? The connection that was going through, but also for the witness's head being in the way. We couldn't see what was on the screen. I did look and try to find some good videos where we could actually see it, but there weren't any. And I could almost swear we got way better view back before. Those exhibits are missing off of the Colorado Judicial website where they have all of the evidence listed. I don't know if they ever were there and I saw them. I don't know. Who knows? I could just be imagining it and hoping for the best. But all right. So here we go. We're going to watch Elaine Hall on the stand. Keep in mind, I'm taking this from Law and Crime. Please go subscribe to them. This is where you're going to find all of your trials, all of your court cases, a lot of good information on that channel.
Expected it to be a story.
There will be, some ads. Just bear with me.
I was thinking you could tell.
Here we go.
All the substance of that conversation being the conversation you had with the defendant via text during that same time period.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
If you've been injured in an accident and it wasn't your fault, we can help. Check us out at selflaw.net.
When I was looking for a college to attend, I didn't just want an education, I wanted an experience. When I found
truth and nothing but the truth. Okay. Sit down and you got to talk a lot louder than that.
May I inquire? Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
If you want to make yourself comfortable and you can pull your chair closer to the microphone or the microphone closer to you. Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Can you please state your full name, spelling your last name for the record?
Elaine Susan Hall, Hall.
Morning, Ms. Hall. Where do you currently live?
In Monument, Colorado.
With whom do you live?
With my husband, Mike.
What's your husband's full name?
Michael Lee Hall.
How long have you been married to Michael Hall?
We got married in 2015.
How long have you lived in Monument?
Since 2012.
Where'd you live before that?
We lived for maybe 2 months in Colorado Springs on Artistic, and before then I lived in the Durango area, in between Bayfield and Durango.
Okay. So when did you move from Durango up to Colorado Springs?
August. I think it was August of 2012.
You mentioned the Artistic area. What are you referring to?
That was a house that we rented because we were remodeling our house in Monument. So we rented that house, which is where Dylan met Joe and Kristen and those friends. is in that area.
You mentioned Dylan. Can you tell the jury who Dylan is in relation to?
Dylan was my youngest son. He was 13.
How many kids have you had, that's all?
I have 2 boys.
What's your other boy's name?
Corey.
Was Corey born?
Corey was born in November of 91. In February of 99.
Where were they each born?
Corey was born in Denver, Colorado, and Dylan was born in Denver, Colorado.
Where were you living at the time of Dylan's birth?
In Denver, Colorado.
And how old was Dylan when he was murdered?
He was 13.
Spend a couple minutes telling the jury about Dylan, okay?
You heard a lot yesterday from all of his friends, and it's all true. Dylan was sweet. He was funny. He was charismatic. He was very empathetic. He really cared about people and their feelings. Very sweet boy.
Okay, Ms. Hall. There's tissues to the left if you need them. You have water with you. And if at any point you need a break, of course, the court would allow us to take a break, okay? Where was Dylan raised?
He was raised between Denver and Durango. He was, I think he was 4 or 5 when we moved from Denver to Durango.
And in his, I wouldn't say early teen years, but I'll say from 11, 12, 13, what kind of things did Dylan like to do on a regular basis?
He loved video games, of course. He loved sports, baseball, football, any kind of sport. He was very enthusiastic about anything he tried to do. When he played baseball, the coach had to tell me that Dylan had to play his spot because he played the entire field. So he was on it.
Where was Dylan living in September, October, and November of 2012?
We were transitioning from the artistic house into the monument house in Colorado Springs area.
Say we, who are you referring to?
My husband, myself, my son. My husband has 2 kids, and Dylan.
Your husband being Mr. Hall.
Yes.
And what school was Dylan going to in the fall of 2012?
Monument Middle School.
Grade was he in?
He was in 8th.
And how would you describe Dylan's hours of sleep, generally?
He was a night owl, like me. During school hours, I tried to have a bedtime, but as he got older, obviously we needed to compromise. So during school, he would generally go to sleep around 10, and then when there was no school or on the weekends, I kind of let him stay up until he was ready to go to bed.
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not with...
Those hours kind of varied.
About Dylan's TV watching. Did he watch TV a lot?
More than watching TV, he played the video games. So when he was on the TV, it was primarily on the video games.
About phone use. Did Dylan have a cell phone?
He did.
And how frequently would he use his phone from your interactions and experiences?
He used it quite often. When he got one, I think it was very liberating to him, and he used it.
Jury's also heard some testimony about an iPod. Tell the jury about that.
Yes, we bought him an iPod for Christmas, and he used that quite often as well. I never knew how it worked, so it was difficult for me. But he was pretty good about explaining it to me, and because he knew that these devices had to have my permission, like any apps or anything that he would download. So I paid attention to that, but he used both frequently.
When you say you weren't sure how the iPod worked, what specifically are you referring to?
I don't know how you can text on it. I don't know how you can, I really don't understand I thought it was just for music. So apparently there's a lot more that you can do with one.
How about social media use? What were you aware of Dylan doing with regards to social media?
I let him get a Facebook account. I believe it was in 2010, I think. And at first he was on it more often. And as he got older, it wasn't as big of a deal as it was obviously when he first got on it. But he did use social media, Facebook primarily.
For his cell phone and iPod, did he also have charges for those devices?
Yes.
So in the fall of 2012, he's in 8th grade.
Yes.
Touched on this briefly. Who were some of the friends that he was spending a lot of time with at that point in his life?
Well, he had a couple of friends from Monument, but he was really close to Joe and Kristen and Adam even after we had moved. Because it's about, I don't know, sometimes a half hour from Monument to where we lived. It depends on, obviously, traffic. But, like on the weekends, he would go down to Joe and Kristen and Adam's houses down in there. They all lived really close together.
That was actually my next question.
Oh.
The place you lived in the artistic neighborhood, where was that located in relation to Joe Ceballos, Kristen Baird, and Adam Park?
Kristen and Adam were right across the street, and Joe was like 2 houses down on the same side.
So even after you moved to Monument, which you described as a half hour away or so, is that right?
Yeah.
Dylan would spend a lot of time with those 3 friends.
Yes.
I'm going to turn now to November of 2012. When was the last time you saw your son, Dylan?
When I put him on the plane to go to Durango, so November 18th.
And where were you specifically? What airport?
Colorado Springs Airport.
Tell the jury about that moment.
Dylan was supposed to fly out on the 17th of November, but there was some problem with the plane. So they rescheduled him to board on November 18th. And so we went to the airport, and I got one of those passes that you can do with minors. And we went and had some lunch at the airport, and then I took him to the gate. He had I think he's switching planes in Denver, so we just discussed, text me when you get to Denver and let me know that you get on the plane okay. And then I hugged him.
So he's flying out of Colorado Springs.
Yes.
Approximately what time of day was the flight leaving?
It's like mid-afternoon, I believe.
You mentioned the flight was going to go first to Denver?
Yes.
And then ultimately to Durango?
Yes.
You mentioned a pass that you can get for minors. For those that don't know what you're referring to, what is that and what did it allow you to do?
It's a guardian pass, if you will, and it just allows me to go back to Dylan's gate because normally you have to be a ticketed passenger to get back in the area, the security area. And so I had to get one of those so that I could see him.
Okay, real quick, I wanted to pause and just say, imagine that. I'm a worrier kind of by default. And, imagine you're putting your kid on the plane and her concerns were, now while she suspected Mark from the beginning, she had no qualms about him going. She didn't have a problem with him going to be with his dad because, that's his father. So she felt like he was going to be safe. Everything was going to be fine. I'm willing to bet her concern was that damn airplane. I'm sure she was concerned about that, a wreck or him doing that layover in Denver and, something happening to him in the airport and no one being around to help this young man. She probably never, ever, ever thought for a second that it was going to be, the outcome that it had. I mean, none of us do when it comes to these tragedies, but I just, as a mom, I bet you her she was concerned that that plane landed okay and flew okay, and that all the mechanics, checked everything out the way that they were supposed to, and that, he was able to find his connecting flight. She never really thought this was going to happen.
And you mentioned hugging Dylan. Where did that happen within the airport?
As he was boarding his plane, he was walking away, and he always called me Mutti, which is German for mom. And I said, "Oh, you're too old to give your mom a hug." And he came back and gave me a hug.
I don't think I would have enrolled in regular therapy, but with BetterHelp, it's just so.
Where was he going?
Ultimately, his destination was Durango
To
visit his father, Mark.
see Mark Redwine in the courtroom here today?
Yes.
Point to him identifying an article of clothing that he's wearing for the record.
He's wearing a blue shirt and gray suit.
Subject to cross-examination, identifying the defendant.
Record can reflect the defendants again been identified.
Dylan wants to go.
People ask me that question. It's a hard question to answer. He got bored up in Bayfield. He was often there alone, and he wanted to see his friends in Bayfield. I mean, that was really important to him.
Was there a reason he had to go?
It was a court order.
I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes, okay? How often had he visited there during the fall of 2012?
I believe Mark and Dylan went on a trip in August. And then I think that was the year he also came down over Labor Day. I can't remember if it was that year or the year before. But that was it, those two times.
And the trip that you mentioned?
To Boston, and they went somewhere else, but I can't remember where. But I know they went to Boston.
And then perhaps Labor Day of 2012, Dylan, to your recollection, may have come down to the Durango area to visit the defendant.
Yes.
And how often in the 2 years prior to November of 2012 had Dylan come down to the Durango area to visit his father?
Not often. Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
I'll ask it a different way. During that year, 2012, how often did Dylan come down to the Bayfield area to visit his father?
Not often. I mean, we were still living in Durango in 2012 until August. So between January and August, or maybe it was July actually. I don't know. It's fuzzy, but I don't believe he went to Bayfield anytime in 2012 between January and when we moved.
And who was Dylan living with during that time in 2012 primarily?
He was living with me and Corey.
Where were you and Corey living during 2012 before the move up to the Springs area?
In a house that I had purchased on Windmill Drive.
Where is Windmill Drive located?
It is in between. It's on County Road, off County Road 223, and it's between Durango and Bayfield.
Let's switch gears slightly here, Ms. Hall, if that's okay. Were you aware that the defendant had a fire at his house in Bayfield at some point a year or two earlier?
I had heard about it from the boys, yes.
And you're aware that remodeling or renovation was being done to put the house back in the state where they could live in it?
Yes. I mean, I was aware.
Prior to the visit pursuant to the court order, had Dylan ever come back from a visit to his father's house in Bayfield with any cuts or injuries of any kind?
Not that I can recall.
And during those visits, did Dylan ever walk off and leave the defendant, to your knowledge?
No, not that I know of, no.
About hitchhiking. Jury's heard some testimony about hitchhiking. Do you know anything about the times or time that Dylan ever hitchhiked?
No,
Call anything about that?
no.
Now, this case has been pending for quite some time.
It has.
You recall speaking with investigators at different points throughout the case?
Oh, yes. I mean, many different times.
At one moment, Your Honor. You may.
At Tinker Federal Credit Union, we're hiring the next great you. Join a team where you get
In regards to the hitchhiking question I asked, do you think it would refresh your recollection if I were able to show you a report regarding an interview that you gave to investigators back in March of 2013?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Of course, permission, I'd like to approach and show the witness discovery page 436.
No objection.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Hall, does that refresh your recollection as to a conversation you had in March of 2013 with one of the investigators who at that point was investigating the disappearance of your son?
Yes.
With regards to hitchhiking, what do you recall telling her, if anything?
Well, I remember speaking about the whole hitchhiking. I've always had a fear of having a missing child because I watch the news and stuff. It's heart-wrenching. And I always told both of my boys, never get in a vehicle with someone you don't know. And I hammered that into their head quite often. So when I found out about this hitchhiking incident, it didn't make sense to me that Dylan would stick out his thumb, and take a ride with somebody. And then after I had conversations with the boys, they told me that it was really snowing hard, they were freezing, and it was, they were sitting in the back of the truck. They weren't in the cab of the truck. And he was with his friends. So it's not like he was standing on a highway with his thumb out by himself. He was with his friends and they were freezing.
That's the one time that you're aware of that Dylan ever hitchhiked.
Yes.
That's what you explained to the investigators back in March of 2013.
Yeah.
Sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the same hitchhiking experience that Ryan Nava talked about when he testified.
Yes.
So, your son, Corey, how old is Corey now?
Corey is 29.
What was the age difference between Corey and Dylan?
8 years.
What was their relationship like from your perspective?
They were very close. Corey, he was 8 years older than Dylan, so he really helped me a lot because I was basically a single mother and I was working full-time as well. And so Corey would get Dylan to school, get himself to school. He was kind of my cab, if you will, with Dylan, make sure he got to his baseball games and everything if I couldn't be there due to work.
What were you doing for work in those years?
I was the director of financial aid at Fort Lewis College.
How long did you do that for?
At that school or in general?
I was starting with that school.
I was there for 9 years.
How about in general?
In general, I started my career when I was 19 as a work study in the financial aid office, and I just kept doing that line of work.
I want to back up and have you talk with the jury about how the November trip came about. Okay?
Okay.
Take you through a number of questions.
Okay.
The jury's hearing evidence regarding the murder of your son.
Objection, that's not a question. Objection to the form of the question. Objection to the term murder.
I'm going to sustain the use of that term for trial.
The jury's hearing evidence about an incident involving your son, Dylan. I'm going to focus on, in these questions I'm going to ask you, the family dynamics to set the context for that, okay?
Okay.
So obviously you could share a lot more, but I'm going to focus on the events that bring us here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
At 1-800-CONTACTS, we're here for Mike, who knows bikes a lot better than he does contacts. Well,
They like to pay their bills, guys. Bear with us on the ads.
1-800-CONTACTS.
This right here is one of my 18 audiobooks that I own. It made 82 sales last month on Audible.
How long were you married to the defendant for?
We got married in 1991, and I believe our divorce was final in 2007.
And after the divorce was finalized, how was child custody handled in those first few years?
I can't remember specifically what the court order said, but Mark was over the road, so he was not in town very often, and I was okay with him having Dylan whenever he wanted to see Dylan. I let Corey make up his own mind because at that time Corey was 20 years old, and you know, his relationship with Mark could be what they wanted it to be. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Dylan was supposed to see him every weekend. I can't really remember what the custody rules were at that time.
And moving forward, when you're moving to Colorado Springs, did you go through proceedings with the court to determine who would have primary custody?
We did that after, because I had to vacate my house on Windmill, because at that time, I let Mark have the house, because we were just going back and forth in the settlement dispute. So we had to move out of our house on Windmill that the boys had basically been raised in. And at that time, I decided that I would just move down to Colorado Springs because my mom was not doing very well, and she lived in Florence.
When was that?
It was like in July or August of 2012.
July or August of 2012, you're about to start making the move to the Colorado Springs area.
Yes.
And do you go back to the court?
We did. We went back in September.
With regards to those September court proceedings, was custody decided in September of 2012?
Yes.
The court here from Dylan as part of the proceedings leading to the court's order.
Yes.
Based on the court's review, who was awarded primary custody of Dylan?
I was.
By primary custody, what did that mean in that case?
That Dylan would reside with me and go to school in the area that I was living in, and then obviously have visitation with his father.
To your knowledge, was Dylan living with you Dylan's preference as well?
Yes.
And that's what was ordered by the court?
Yes.
The Thanksgiving holiday, how did that come about during those proceedings?
That was a court order that he go to Durango for Thanksgiving. And so he did. Well, I put him on a plane.
In the lead up to that trip, were you engaging in emails with the defendant about the arrangements for that trip?
I was. I can't recall specifically what we were saying, but I know that there were emails from Mark letting me know the plane information and stuff like that.
Go on ahead, Coach. You may. All I'm showing you, it's been previously marked as exhibit number 8 for identification, and it's been shown to counsel. Take a moment to look over that exhibit, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions about it, okay?
Okay.
Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is that?
It's emails from Mark and I about Dylan's travel to Durango.
What dates are on the emails?
It starts on Sunday, November 11th, and then it ends November 18th.
Recall those communications between you and the defendant during that time?
Yes.
And do you recognize the email addresses that were being used by you and the defendant at that time?
Yes.
All right, at this time, and does it fairly and accurately represent the email exchanges between you and the defendant during that time period?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the people move people's case evidence. Any objection?
I respectfully object under relevance as 2 portions of Exhibit 8. I believe they address ancillary issues.
What if you could do SEO smarter and faster? With Wix, you can edit your meta
In the separation and divorce, they're more prejudicial than probative and distracting to the jury.
Any response?
Your Honor, it's part of the email exchange between Ms. Hall and the defendant setting up the trip for Dylan Redwine to come to Durango.
Okay, these are going to be the emails that we saw, what was it, day 1, day 2, maybe day 1, I think, where we did the interviews of both mom and dad with the news station. And then we went through some of the exhibits and we read through the email communication from when they were planning to get Dylan on the plane. So that's kind of where we're at. And just to recap too, they were married in 91. Their divorce was final in 07. And then that custody agreement where it sounds like that where Dylan went in front of the judge and stated that he didn't want to live with his dad, etc. That took place September of 2012. Dylan went missing, was ultimately found to be deceased. And that took place all in November of 2012. So, breaks my heart.
In November of 2012, it's a relatively short email exchange, and I think it's key for the jury to see how the trip came about, what the communications were around this as well.
Okay. I'm going to allow it in. I understand what Mr. Bogan's talking about. I think the jury can understand that sometimes divorced people don't get along and issues arise, and we'll go from there. So it's admitted.
Thank you, Honor. Ma'am, I'm going to put People's 8 up on the screen behind you. can either look at the screen if you like, or the document in front of you. The email that we're going to focus on first is actually on the second page of Exhibit 8. So what is this email?
This is an email from Mark to me about Dylan's flight itinerary.
For what trip?
For the Thanksgiving trip?
2012.
Yes.
And you see on the from line, whose name?
From Mark Redwine?
To line is you.
Yes.
Who's on the CC line?
Dana at Durango Family Law?
Familiar with who that is?
No.
The judge just mentioned sometimes divorced individuals have difficult relationships. Paraphrase. That's fine. Fair to say you and the defendant had at times a very contentious divorce?
Yes.
So this is, the individual on the CC line is not someone that you're familiar with, as you said.
No.
The email is sent on November 11th at 8:42 p.m.
Yes.
Read the email aloud, please.
By now, you should have received Dylan's flight itinerary. As you know, Dylan has failed to respond to all my communication attempts. Sorry. So I will have to rely on you to inform him of his travel. Also, since you have failed to address any support issues, you may have, I expect all his needs are being addressed. So all the monies in his personal account are not needed. XXX. Sent from Dylan's iPad.
He sent from Dylan's iPad. We're going to talk about, in a couple minutes, we're going to talk about how this email is provided to law enforcement. Okay. Says by now you should have received Dylan's flight itinerary. What is that regarding?
What is that what?
What was that about?
Gosh, I don't remember specifically, but I assume it's for the November 2012 flight to Durango over Thanksgiving break.
You know, Dylan has failed to respond to all my communication attempts, so I'll have to rely on you to inform him of his travel. What is that regarding?
I guess Dylan wasn't communicating with Mark the way Mark wanted Dylan to communicate with him. I mean, I really always got a lot of grief from Mark about Dylan not communicating with Mark.
On occasion, had you prompted or pushed Dylan to communicate?
I did. I mean, I said, you know, I'm hearing from your dad that you're not responding. And he would basically say, there's just really nothing to say.
Also, since you failed to address any support issues you may have, I expect all his needs are being addressed. All the monies in his personal account are not needed. What was that about?
Objection, relevance.
You're going to have to explain the relevance, so come on up. I don't understand that either.
First, there's an idea, and you do something about it for the first time with GoDaddy. Then, before you know it, you make your first.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. We'll wait till you get ready. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have overruled the objection, but I do want to give you an instruction that this evidence about what was in Dylan's personal account should not be used by you for any purpose other than seeing what was going on with Dylan's personal account that was set up by his parents. The fact that these two, Mr. and at that time Ms. Redwine, were having arguments and disagreements about the divorce, that's a common thing. You should not use any of those disagreements to think that Mr. Redwine had bad character, was a bad person, and therefore did bad things. This is specifically limited to what went on with the money in Dylan's account. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So as the court just explained, Ms. Hall, we're focusing just on, as the defendant puts it, his personal account, Dylan's personal account, not the years of child support or divorce litigation, contentious divorce. We're just focused on what's relevant to this case. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So all the monies in his personal account are not needed. What is his personal account regarding?
It was an account that Mark had actually set up for Dylan so that he would have like walking around money. I guess. I mean, I wasn't privy or a part of that account being set up.
You have access to that account?
No.
I'm going to move up here to your response to this email from the defendant. November 11th, 2012 at 9:51 p.m. So this is just later in the evening on the same day. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you read to the jury what you respond to the defendant?
I am aware and have told Dylan, I hope he will be able to do something while he's there, as he's not real thrilled about the idea of sitting around your house. I am working on getting the paperwork in for support, but the money in his account is for him, I thought, and not support. Feel free to send money to help support him, though. That would be great.
So I'm aware and I have told Dylan that with regards to the flight arrangements?
Yes.
I hope you'll be able to do something while he's there, because he's not real thrilled about the idea of sitting around your house. What prompted you to say that?
That was one of Dylan's biggest complaints, is when he would go to Bayfield. It's very remote where Mark lived. He didn't have any friends within walking distance of Mark's house. And so they would basically just sit in Mark's house, and Dylan would be incredibly bored.
For this November 2012 trip, you were under the impression that Dylan did not want to go to his father's house?
Yes.
Objection Foundation.
I'm going to explain how she knows that.
How'd you know that?
Dylan told me.
And did you talk about it at length with Dylan?
Yes.
Based on those conversations with Dylan, what did you do to check to see if Dylan actually had to go on the trip?
I contacted my attorney at the time and asked if there was anything we could do. And she basically said it was a court order and I would be in violation of the court and that we would have to work on this in the future.
Who was your attorney at the time?
Amber Harrison.
Harrison told you that due to court order, Dylan had to go visit with his father for Thanksgiving holiday.
Yes.
What prompted you to reach out to Ms. Harrison to check on that?
Because Dylan was pretty adamant that he wanted to be with us at Thanksgiving, especially since Amber Harrison.
Okay, I have to stop because I just, it really, yes, Gail, you took the words right out of my mouth. It is just so sad that he was forced to go. And even more importantly than Dylan being forced to go, the fact that his mom, that Elaine, felt forced to make him go. Does that make sense? Like she just said, she was told, like, hey, you'll be held in contempt of court. Oh, he never came home, guys. The man that he did not want to go see murdered him. They all felt it before. Now, it's not so much that they felt that he was going to be murdered per se, but like, damn. Oh, I would second guess every single, like, I mean, I do that anyway, but I mean, I would like quadrillion triple guess every single decision I make from then on out. I would be a recluse. I would stay in my home. I wouldn't be able to deal with people after this because they all freaking knew. They all felt it. Oh, it just breaks my heart.
His Oma, which is my mother, was diagnosed with cancer, and he wanted to spend that Thanksgiving with my side of the family and with her.
What was the nature of your son Corey's relationship with the defendant around that time?
Relevance, objection.
I can see that it's relevant. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ms. Wall.
In November of 2012. Gosh, I don't believe they had a pretty tumultuous relationship. So it's hard for me to remember when they were talking and when they were not. But I don't think at that time they were on good terms.
You're aware that Corey will be testifying in this trial as well?
Yes.
Then skipping ahead, well, the next sentence talks briefly about the child support, so I'll move past that. Then you say, but the money in his account is for him. What do you mean by that?
Well, when Mark said, since I have failed to address support issues, and that the monies in his personal account are not needed, I didn't look at the money in his personal account as child support. I looked at it as an account for Dylan that Mark had set up so that Dylan could have some money. So I was baffled at that statement.
And who, to your knowledge, had access to that personal account that you're referring to?
I think Mark. I don't think Dylan was ever able to get into that account.
What do you mean by that?
He always got...
And this objection, this calls for speculation. She preceded her answer, I think. But now she's...
I think it may be a foundational objection.
Foundation as well.
Be more likely to grant, so if you can lay a foundation for that, that's helpful.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you aware of the circumstances around the personal account for Dylan being set up? In other words, were you aware Dylan had a personal account?
Dylan had told me yes.
And during that conversation with Dylan, did you learn how Dylan would have access?
Dylan told me that his dad had set up an account, and Dylan had a card, but Dylan could never, either the PIN number was wrong or he could never access the funds in that account, and he was frustrated by it.
By a card, what are you referring to?
Like an ATM card.
And frustrated about what?
The fact that he could never access the funds in that account because he thought those funds were set up for him to use.
We found droplets of blood in the car.
Well, who do you think?
So I'm curious to know, I'm curious to know the relevance then. That right there goes to the character of Mark, right? The narcissistic abuse that he held over Elaine and Dylan and Corey. He sat there and loaded this account with money for Dylan, and then I believe it was strategic that he couldn't get in there. He didn't really want him to use that money because Mark clearly said in that email, well, since I'm just going to take it back. I don't know. That's interesting to me that Dylan was never able to access the money. The ATM card stuff is strange. It's very strange. And then they discussed that if I remember correctly, and we'll find out a little bit later on, I think Mark ended up being in possession of that debit card. Either that or it was never found, but I feel like they found it, that Mark had it. But it's interesting to find out Dylan was never able to access it. And his mom says either the PIN number wouldn't work or blah, blah, blah. So that's interesting. I don't know. I find that interesting.
Move ahead in Exhibit 8 here. That response you sent to the defendant was on November 11th, 2012. You then get a response from him on November 18th regarding different addresses to send a check, child support. We're going to move ahead here. November 18th, 2012, there's an email here where you talk about where best things should be sent. That was November 18th, 12:44. What do you say to the defendant in that email?
Starting with the per your request or starting with the yes, Dylan is checked in?
Dylan is checked in.
This is on November 18th at 12:44. Dylan is checked in and will arrive in Durango at 5:13. Please let me know that you will be there. We are moving to Monument now, but send anything to Florence. Please do not send anything or contact my place of employment as it put my last job in jeopardy.
Okay, I want you to stop there, okay? That's something that the jury should not consider at all. So that's part of what we talked about, where they had a divorce, they weren't getting along. That happens, but that can't be used in any manner to make Mr. Redwine look like a bad person. So go ahead. So my limiting instruction, I think I just talked about Ms. Hall's testimony, but it also applies to Exhibit A. So go ahead.
Thank you. And how does the defendant respond at 2:14 p.m.?
Okay, I'm going to pause it really quick because this is the stuff that I cannot stand, right? And we actually, I'll play, I don't know that we'll do it today. We'll see. But one of his advisement hearings, they discuss aggravating factors and stuff in regards to his bond and, whether or not he should, have a lower bond or be able to get out, et cetera, et cetera. I'm so tired of these people having a history, having a past, and it's never able to be brought out. I won't say ever, but for the most part, it's not brought out in court. The jury is to disregard and to, not look at the fact that, this person did blah, 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 blah in their background, because what's the biggest predictor of the future? Like the history, the past. Once somebody does something and acts a certain way, and unless they've made personal internal changes, they are the same. And Elaine had issues with Mark. Mark did not, I will scream it from the rooftops. In my opinion, Mark did not want to divorce Elaine. Elaine was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He thought he would never find love again. I mean, clearly the dude eats poop, in his free time. So yeah, Elaine was like queen goddess, right? And she got away from him the best that she could, and he contacted her work and he caused problems at her work. That's why in that very first day that we started this series, when we were talking or when we watched the videos that they did with the news station, and Mark in his news interview, right, they're interviewing him about his missing son. Okay, his missing 13-year-old son. And he's like, well, I know where she works. And like, I don't know why she's trying to keep it a secret. Like anybody, like why? Like we could find out where she works. Like, really? Yeah, you're disgusting human. Anyway, it frustrates me that the jury doesn't get to know about the past history of the people that end up being defendants, especially in these horrible murder trials. Okay.
p.m. on Sunday, November 8th.
Yes, of course, I will be there. I am very much looking forward to seeing the little guy.
During that same time period, were you also texting with the defendant?
And I can't recall.
You may.
Ask you to take a moment and look over Exhibit 6. And I'm going to ask you a number of questions.
So the top page is the starting point, or the bottom page is the starting point?
Top page, starting point.
Thank you.
Hall, I just need you to look at the date and the phone numbers, and then I think I can ask you some questions and go from there.
Okay, so you don't want me to read all this?
You can, but I think we might be able to.
Okay.
Who's this text exchange between?
Mark and I?
How do you recognize it to be a text exchange between you and the defendant?
The telephone numbers and just the general conversation.
You recall the substance of that conversation being the conversation you had with the defendant via text during that same time period?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
All having that conversation with the defendant during that same time period text.
Vaguely.
Recognize the phone numbers on the text messages.
Yes.
And whose phone numbers are those?
Mark's. On all these texts, it just shows his number.
And you're the one responding to those text messages from him?
Yes.
At this time, people move people 6 into evidence. Any objection?
Your Honor, I object to portions of page 6, of Exhibit 6. Specifically, I have grave concerns about the third comment on page 3. I have grave concerns about the first green comment on page 4 and the second to last green comment on page 4. I believe that these are comments by the witness regarding her theories, her ideas of what's going on, her opinions of what's going on, and obviously the jurors are the ultimate arbiter of what transpired as the fact finders. And I think this is far more prejudicial than probative.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes, Your Honor. These were provided to counsel previously, of course. This is a back and forth exchange that's taking place between Ms. Hall and the defendant, in specifically regards to counsel's concerns regarding the disappearance of their son. It captures Ms. Hall's reaction, her present sense impression, and is necessary for the jury to understand the context of the other communications between the two of them contained in Exhibit 6.
And Your Honor, it's not a hearsay objection. Thank you. It's more prejudicial than probative and relevance objection. So even it might be a present sense impression, I still don't think it passes muster under the other analysis.
All right. Excuse me. I'm going to allow admit Exhibit 6. The jury is instructed that whatever Ms. Hall thought happened is what Ms. Hall thought happened. And this is your job to determine what happened here. So I don't want you to be swayed by anything that one person says or one person thinks. You're to look at the facts and the law that I give it to you and then make your determination. Go ahead, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Also want to state that since this was provided earlier, we're a little dilatory to be doing this during trial. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So it's in. Thanks. Ms. Hall, Exhibit 6 is now in evidence, which means I can fill in the screen and ask questions up there, okay?
Okay.
At Aspen Dental, new patients without insurance get a free complete exam and x-rays and 20% off treatment plans.
So we have here on the right a text that appears in a green bubble. Who's the person sending this text?
That is me.
And throughout the Exhibit 6, you're the one in the green bubbles?
Yes, that appears to be correct.
And who's responding in the blue text box?
That would be Mark.
So we're going to go through this together. Are you more comfortable reading it from the document in front of you or looking at the screen?
The document in front of me?
So can you read to the jury the first text message?
Dylan's flight got canceled today from Springs to Denver. There's a flight tomorrow leaving Springs at 1:44, getting to Durango at 5:13, so I'll book that one. Dylan tried calling, but you didn't answer.
What's the date and time on that text message you sent to the
11/17/2012.
Backing up a step, can I ask you a couple questions about that?
Sure.
I want to talk to you and just get the jury oriented to the travel arrangements here. So it seems to be indicating that Dylan was supposed to fly out on the 17th?
Yes.
What happened with that?
The flight was canceled. I think it was airplane issues.
How did you find out about that?
I went to the airport, and they said the flight has been canceled.
Which airport did you go to?
Colorado Springs Airport.
And where did you who'd you go with?
Dylan and I went to the airport. It was just Dylan and I.
Then we have the next text box there. What are you saying to the defendant in this one?
I texted you and Dylan tried calling you. His flight was canceled, as I'm sure you knew, as the attendant told me they sent a message to your email. His flight was rescheduled for tomorrow. You should have told me it was canceled. This is Elaine, and you know that.
What is that about?
When I moved from Durango to Colorado Springs area, I took Corey's phone number because Corey was on his own and got his own phone plan and everything. So because Corey's phone was under my plan, I just took his phone number and moved it over to me. And Mark had always...
Can you stop you there for a
Yes.
second? So this is you saying, this is me, Elaine.
Yes.
And how about the part about, I'm sure you knew as the attendant told me they sent a message to you. What's that about?
Well, just that when we showed up at the airport to get Dylan on the airplane, the gal told me that the flight was canceled and it was sent to Mark's email, and she gave me the email address.
You were unaware of that when you went to the airport on November 17th?
Yes.
So what is the plan after the flight's canceled on November 17th?
A new flight the next day was booked.
What did Dylan do the night of November 17th into November 18th?
He stayed with his friends, Joe, Adam, and Kristen on Artistic. He hung out with them.
Whose house did he stay at?
Joe's grandfather's house?
It was the night of November 17th into November 18th.
Yes.
When did you next see Dylan?
On November 18th.
Where'd you see him?
I went to Joe's grandfather's house, and then we still had some stuff in our artistic house, so we stopped by there, and then we left.
Go to where?
To go to the airport.
Go to the airport on November 18th for the rescheduled flight.
Yes.
What was Dylan bringing to the airport for the trip to Durango?
I can't remember specifically, but I know he had a backpack with his phone, his iPod, his chargers for both. He had, I believe, a hoodie, and then his clothes and his personal things. I mean, he was 13, so he was grown up enough to pack his own bag.
How'd you know what he had with him?
Because we had discussed it. I specifically talked about the cell phones and the charger. And Dylan, regardless of what type of weather, he wore shorts. He was always hot, and so he wore shorts. And I specifically asked him if he had pants, at least one pair of pants in his backpack.
Ron, may I approach him? You may. Ms. Hall, I'm showing you what's been previously admitted into evidence of peoples 1, 2, and 3. Can you take a look at those, please?
I've seen those a million times.
What are those?
They're pictures of Dylan on November, I believe these were taken November 17th, 2012 with his friends Adam and Joe.
And you heard Ms. Baird testify yesterday?
Yes.
What clothes are Dylan wearing in those photographs?
He's wearing his shorts and I can't really
Oh, I've hurt for her. Bless her heart.
see. I think this is his box shirt, and then his Blue Devils hat.
And were those the same clothes he was wearing when you picked him up on November 18th, 2012?
I cannot recall.
When you look at those photographs, you see any injuries, sores, or cuts to his face or lips?
No.
And when you picked him up on November 18th, 2012, to go to the airport, you see any injuries, cuts, or sores on his face at all?
No.
During the same time period, would you, on occasion, text with Dylan, your son?
Yes.
Yes.
Paul, I'm showing you what's been previously marked and provided to counsel. It's marked as People's Exhibit 7 for identification.
Okay.
You recognize who these text messages are?
Myself and Dylan.
Recognize the phone numbers on those text messages?
I bet she looks at these text messages or, looked back and wished she would have said a million and one other things. I just can't imagine. This poor mom, she's so strong.
Yes.
And do those text messages accurately reflect the text communications between you and Dylan during that time?
Yes.
And at this time, people move People 7 into evidence. Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
7's admitted.
Of course, permission, Ms. Hall, I'm going to put this on the screen. Who do we have in the blue text box here?
That's Dylan.
Green text box is
me.
So can you read the first text from Dylan to you, please?
I'm on the plane to Durango.
Date of that text?
November 18th, 2012.
Time there says 16:28, which is military time. So if you subtract 12 hours, it's 4:28 p.m. I'm on the plane to Durango. What was the significance of that text message? In other words, what did that mean? Where was Dylan in his course of travel that day?
I think that's when he landed in Denver and went to the other plane in Denver to get on the plane to Durango.
And how do you respond at 4:36 p.m.?
Oh, good. You did well, son. Proud of you. I love you, and thanks for keeping in touch so well. You're a flying pro.
And at 5:21 p.m., what do you text your son, Dylan?
You land in Durango, son?
So the abbreviation DGO is for Durango.
Yes.
We have a response from Dylan on the screen at 5:49 p.m. What does Dylan say?
Just did.
Just asked you, the B3 temp face with a stash. What is that?
I have no idea what that is. I don't know.
Probably a good thing. Okay. So then you respond to Dylan. He sends you the text at 5:49. You respond at 5:51. And what do you say?
Oh, good. I was worried. You're very late, but glad you're safe. Make your dad wait, LOL.
That.
Well, that I was glad he was in Durango, and you know, I was hoping that Mark was actually at the airplane rather than Dylan having to wait on Mark. Mark could wait on Dylan.
Dylan responds at 5:51 p.m. and says what?
Yeah, after all of our waiting.
Send another text to Dylan at 7:03 p.m. on November 8th.
Your dad get you, son?
Ski Hoshi, we maximize toes' comfortableness and support their growth by wide toe. Ski Hoshi, just come visit.
7:06 on November 18th, as Dylan responds.
Yes, with a frowny face.
What was the frowny face regarding?
Objection. The exhibit speaks for itself. More prejudicial than probative. This issue's already been spoken to.
I'm on your side so far. I mean, then it just, I think people can figure out what that means.
Can I rephrase the question?
Well, we'll see. Go ahead.
Was the frowny face consistent with your prior discussions with Dylan about this trip?
Asked and answered. Same objection.
I think that's okay.
Yes.
You respond to
Dylan. He said, objection, please don't tell them how disgusted Dylan was with his dad. That's pretty much what that was.
Dylan 6 minutes later at 7:12 p.m. What do you say?
I miss you already, but try and have fun.
Next text to Dylan that same evening, November 18th, 2012, at 10:09 p.m. What do you text Dylan at that point?
How's it going, son? You okay?
Dylan again.
No.
Last communication you had with Dylan was the yes with a frowny face.
Yes.
Send another text. 12:07 p.m. So it's 7 minutes after noon on November 19th. And what do you say?
How's it going, son? You okay?
All right, Ms. Hall, I know this is, I can only imagine how hard this is. I'm really sorry.
Thank you.
Time, would you need?
I'm okay.
The 10:09 text from the night before. You say, how's it going, son? You okay? Do you hear back from Dylan that night?
No.
Hear back from Dylan ever again?
No.
Go to that next text message the next day, 12:07 p.m. It's November 19th. Do you see that text message in that exhibit?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty, I'm going to make you stand in front of the lectern, please.
Sure.
So we can pick you up on the microphone.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Or speak up would work good.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry. What do you say in that text message on that next text message?
Just to reiterate that text that she sent, what did it say? 10:07 p.m. How's it going, son? Are you all right? Remember, he texts Ryan Nava around 9:30 something, and then 10 o'clock, mom's texting him, and mom never gets a reply from that. Then at noon, maybe it was 12:07, but at noon, she messages again, "Hey, son, how's it going? Are you all right?" And again, she never hears from her son again after that. But by 10 o'clock at night, he was not replying to his mom. And she had already said he was known to, stay up late, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it happened probably between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, I would say, or after 9:30-ish. And enough time for Mark to clean up and dispose, sadly.
On November 19th at 12:07 p.m.
How you doing, son? I miss you.
The final text message in this exhibit is a text message that you send at 2:35 a.m. on November 20th. What do you say in that text message, Ms. Hall?
Sorry.
Your time.
I said, Dylan, please be safe. Mom is here to come get you, son.
What had taken place between the text message you sent during the day on November 19th at 12:07 p.m.?
Mark had texted me.
I have to pause it right there for a moment. You guys on your screen, if you are watching on a mobile device, you can zoom in. It's not the best video quality because the judge really didn't want this to be seen on video. However, due to COVID and what had happened throughout the court system due to the pandemic, we were able to have these cameras in the courtroom. This took place back in 2021. But you can zoom in. Mark is unfazed. These are the text messages between his son and his son's mom while the mom knows that he's missing and she's trying to, get in contact with him. This mom is torn up. Look at her on the stand. I'm not trying to point that out to be, rude or hateful in any way. I'm saying, look at the difference in these two people, the two people that created this young man, that cared for, that were nourishing and growing and loving. And, this was their pride and joy, their baby. And the mom is, reliving the worst night of her life of ever, finding out that her son is missing and never, ever being able to see him again. And the man responsible, if you didn't think he was responsible, you should now, because he's unfazed. He's not bothered. It doesn't bother him to know that his son was missing, to know that, and this may be why the prosecution states this hatred that Mark had for Elaine, because he doesn't, he shows zero compassion for her whatsoever. Again, I still think he was madly in love with her, and that was the best thing that ever happened to him, and she left him and it pissed him off. But he is unbothered. Like, if there was a word for today, that would be it. Mark is just sitting there. He's disturbed. This is sad.
And asked me if I had seen Dylan.
And later that day, night, into the early morning hours, 2:35 a.m., you send the Dylan, please be safe, Mom is here, come get you some.
Yes, when I found out that Mark hadn't seen Dylan, I was getting off of work, so I drove to Monument and I packed a quick bag and I left to go to Durango.
Where were you working at the time?
Colorado College in Colorado Springs.
What was your job there, Ms. Hall?
I was the Associate Director of Financial Aid.
Where were you when you received the text from the defendant asking if you knew where Dylan might be?
I was in my car driving home.
Was that the first point at which you realized Dylan might be missing?
Yes.
What was your reaction, Ms. Hall?
I apologize for interrupting. If this exhibit isn't in play anymore, I'd ask that it not be published to the jury on the screen right now.
You need any more?
No, we can take it down.
Okay, please do.
What was your reaction?
I was frantic. It was nerve-wracking. I was 6 hours away, and he's asking me if I've seen Dylan.
What'd you do at that point?
Drove home, and
again, here comes the defense. Stop telling the jury the facts of the case. We don't want to show them that anymore. Ugh. Gail, good to have you back. Took a shower this morning, and oh no, good. I'm glad it's fixed because I don't know where I would be if I didn't have hot showers, because those are therapeutic to me. They are detrimental to my well-being.
I called my son Corey on my way home, and I said, Mark can't find Dylan. And then when I got home, I told my husband, Mark can't find Dylan, and I packed a bag and I got in my car. And I don't think my husband thought it was a serious matter, because he, at first he was just like, oh, you're just being dramatic.
Judge, I believe this is hearsay and a little bit of narrative, so I'm objecting to this portion of the question or answer.
I'm going to sustain that unless you have reason to let it in.
Fine, Your Honor. Thank you. Did you pack some bags and get ready to head to Durango?
I packed a bag, yes.
And who were you going to go to Durango with?
I was going to go by myself, but then my husband and Corey came with me.
Around what time did you leave from the Colorado Springs area to head to Durango?
I can't recall the exact time, but it must have been probably around 5:30 p.m.
Okay, let me pause real quick, because I'm so glad you said that, Gail, because I've refrained from like pausing and being like, oh my God, his voice like drives me crazy. It's I don't want to say weird, because I don't want to sound like judgmental and whatever, but it's freaking weird. Like it's a different sound, and it like I don't know, maybe he sounds like the guy maybe like in the airport that comes over the intercom that's like, meet your party at the, I don't know, he drives me nuts. Fun fact, the two lawyers, one of them's last name is Bogan, and that's my biological father's last name, so it's kind of funny. TMI, but whatever.
We can go back, course permission, and put number 6 back on the screen. So we're going to pick up where we left off a little bit earlier in the day on November 18th, 2012. These are texts between you and the defendant, and I'd like to direct your attention, Ms. Hall, to a text you send at 5:44 p.m. So it says 17:44, but again, that's military time, so it's 5:44 p.m. What do you text to the defendant at that time?
These don't have the time thing. I can't see the time thing, so I'm not sure.
So the time, and we could use the screen if you like, and the times appear both on the paper document but also on the screen in the right-hand corner. If you like,
Okay, I see this one now, yes. Okay. So, is the, can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. 5:44 p.m. So the 17:44. You see that one?
44. Yes. Did you get Dylan okay?
What does the defendant say in response at 5:45?
Nope, didn't show up.
What do you say then at 5:45 in return?
Is the plane delayed? Well, I said, is the plan delayed? And then I sent another text saying plane.
What does the defendant respond to you at 5:46 on November 8th?
Don't have flight info, waiting to hear from him.
Say what?
I wish I could show you guys. If you see me look off camera and, to something, my dog thinks I'm talking to him because there's nobody else in the room and I'm talking. So, of course, he's center of attention. So Big Chief over here thinks that I'm talking to him, and he is doing any and everything he can do to get my attention and to talk back. So I'm paying attention, I promise. Just need to let y'all know. And if you want to see Big Chief, go like my personal pages on TikTok or YouTube. It's me, January. You guys see me down there in the chat.
At 5:47.
OMG, just go in the airport and ask.
That's at 5:47 on November 18th, right? And after that, you then hear from Dylan that he's landed, and you know then that he's in Durango.
Yes.
Next text that you receive from the defendant, is that the one that notifies you that Dylan is missing?
Yes.
Text is November 19th at 4:32 p.m. Do you see it there? It says November 19th, 16:32 or 4:32 p.m.
Yes, but I will say on this sheet, those are blocked out, so it's hard for me to see the time. But yes.
Yes.
There's stars or whatever there.
When you do, of course, permission is asked you to step down.
Okay.
That's fine. Please use the microphone so we get your sound picked up. And again, it's the mute button on there that turns it on if it's off.
Approach again, Your Honor.
It's on. Yes. Okay. It's on. I heard you.
So the defendant sends you a text at 4:32 in the afternoon on November 19th, 2012. Do you see that?
It was on.
Yes.
And what does that text message from the defendant tell you?
Elaine, I'm wondering if you have heard from Dylan. I've been trying to reach him all afternoon.
Ms. Hall, what do you say in response at 4:37 p.m.?
It's really worrying when I'm 7 hours away and get a message like this from you. I haven't heard from Dylan today. Where did you leave him or last see him?
The defendant responds at 4:39 p.m. and says what, Ms. Hall?
I went to town for errands and he was fine. I am just concerned and thought you may have heard from him.
How do you respond to that text at 4:42 p.m.?
Was he at the Bayfield house? I'm concerned as well as Will. Please let me know when you find him.
How does the defendant respond at 4:44 p.m.?
Yes, at the lake, and I will.
What do you say at 4:47 in that text message to the defendant?
It's weird that he would just up and leave. Does he have his phone?
The defendant responds at 4:50 p.m. And what does he say to you at that point?
I agree, which is why I'm asking if you have heard from him. I assume he does, and why I have sent him texts and calls. What I don't know is if he has a charger or if it's charged.
And that message is sent at 4:50 p.m.
Yes.
And you were aware that Dylan had his chargers with him?
Yes.
Now you send a message at 4:51 p.m. on November 19th, and what do you say?
I am terribly freaked out that he's roaming around in the dark. I think we should call the police.
How does the defendant respond at 4:55?
I didn't want to freak you out, as I'm sure he's fine, but don't think I am not concerned. I just left the Bayfield Marshal's office and headed back to the house.
And at 4:55, you send a text message to the defendant?
Yes. Want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Did you get into a fight with him or something?
And at 4:57, you send another text saying what?
How long has he been missing?
What does the defendant say at 4:57 on November 19th?
No, we talked and everything is fine.
And at 4:58?
Okay, I'm going to pause that real quick. Look at that. Look at the gut instinct, the mama brain, the mama heart, the mama knowledge immediately. He's like, hey, have you seen him? She's like, WTF, he got on a freaking plane and went to you. Why would I see him? He doesn't have a car. He can't drive. He can't come over here. Anyway, and they have this little communication back and forth, and immediately Elaine Hall, Dylan's mom, says, did you get in a fight with him or something? Sadly, I think that's exactly what happened. I think Mark wouldn't let him go see his friends. Dylan copped an attitude. Mark probably didn't shut his mouth and kept on about Corey and Elaine and yada, yada, yada. And Dylan potentially brought up those pictures that we saw. And that's all she wrote. But this mama knew, guys. She knew from day freaking one, minute one. What'd you do? Get in a fight with him? What'd you do to him, Mark? So sad. Yes, mama's intuition, man. Don't ever, ever discredit your gut instinct. Now, some of y'all walk around here, worry warts, and you have delusional thinking and, some stuff like that going on. I'm not judging by no means. So sometimes you got to really learn the difference between like a gut instinct and, your brain just trying to tell you stuff and put stuff in your head. But she knew, man. She knew something wasn't right. And you can tell even earlier, I didn't pause it to speak. I was letting it play. But when she was texting with Dylan and she said, okay, son, try to have fun. The defense really does not want it said that, Dylan didn't want to go. They have fought every ounce, every word, every tidbit there was in regards to Dylan saying that he didn't want to go, and it's speculation and blah, 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 blah. And, the mom even tried to say like he was bored over there. He didn't like it. But the fact that she even said, try to have fun, son. My son went at about 14, I believe, to Florida. And that was his first time getting on a plane alone without, a parent. That was his first time going out of state, without a family member. He was going with a friend and their family. And, my communications were not to him like, okay, well, try to have fun. No, I was like, boy, enjoy yourself, get in the ocean, blah, blah, blah. Like it was a completely different spirit and vibe behind it. You could tell he did not want to go, and that freaking judge made him go. Ooh, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Okay, sorry.
Several hours.
And that looks like it's in response to how long has he been missing?
Yes.
What do you say at 4:58 p.m.?
Well, it's not fine. He's missing.
And at 5:40 p.m., so this is about 42 minutes later, you text the defendant, and what do you say?
Have you heard anything from Dylan? You said you called the marshal's office. They have no record of you calling them. I called them.
What do you mean by that?
Just that when I called the marshal's office, they didn't have a report or anything on Dylan being missing, or they really didn't know anything.
What prompted you to call law enforcement?
Because Mark couldn't find Dylan, and I needed some help.
In addition to calling the marshal's office, what other steps did you take to contact law enforcement?
I can't recall specifically. I mean, we were driving at the time.
Okay, I'm going to pause it real quick. So yesterday I told you guys that I found the jury questions. And we can pull those up. But one of the jury questions that they had, which we'll get to after after the prosecution is finished, and then there's the cross-examination with the defense. And then the judge will ask if the jury has any questions. But one of their questions was, when you called and asked, when Mark said he called the sheriff's office, and then Elaine calls the sheriff's office, Mark had stated that he went to the sheriff's office. So the jury's question was, was that were they telling you, no, he didn't call in? Or were they telling you, no, we hadn't spoken to him at all. He didn't show up, or he didn't call, or whatever. not quite sure what the answer is. It's been a while since I watched this, but I just wanted to let you guys know that the jury is listening. They're paying attention.
I know I made a number of calls to the marshal's office. And then when we got into town, we went directly to the marshal's office.
You may. Now I'm going to ask you to take a look at Mark 4 for demonstration.
Got my theater.
Take down this. Mentioned that you yourself called the police, called the marshal's office, and that's what prompted that text that you sent to the defendant that you just read.
Yes.
What is Exhibit 4 there?
It says call to dispatch, and then it's got 31020 and my initials.
And on March 10th of 2020, those initials signify that you listened to that and verified it was a recording of the same call.
Yes.
And did that recording fairly accurately, in effect, exactly capture the call that you made back on November 19th, 2012?
Honestly, I don't remember specifically what the call, but I'm sure that if I initialed it, then I heard it. And yes. Uh-huh.
So I know this is a weird process, and it's very strange. We have to go through this formula to get things admitted into evidence. So I know it sounds weird, so I recognize that. When I ask you these questions, it means when you listen to the recording, was that your voice on the recording?
Yes.
And did you recognize it to be your voice calling dispatch in response to your son going missing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to ask that People's 4 be admitted into evidence.
Foundation, cumulative, she's testified as to the call she made to dispatch already.
Foundation's a little weak, but I think it's okay. I don't think it's cumulative, but I think it's all right. So it's admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Again, defense, please don't tell the jury the truth. Don't tell them what happened. Ugh, it's getting on my nerves.
Sorry, Josh. I got to leave him. Hi, my name is Elaine Redwine, and my son Dylan Redwine was visiting his dad up in Durango. I live in Colorado Springs. And his dad texted me a little while ago and said he could not find Dylan. Okay, so 14 years old. Okay, do you know the address of the dad? 2343 County Road 500 is up in Bayfield. Okay. So 2343 County Road 500 is Bayfield. Yes, and his dad said called the marshal's office. I don't know if that's true or not. Let me see here. Let me see if this has been taken yet. He didn't. Okay. We don't have a record of it. What is your name? I'm sorry. What's your last name? Redwine. Redwine. And your first name again? Elaine. Elaine. And your phone number? 970-903-6843. 903-6843. Yeah. Okay. And his name is Dylan Redwine. My son's name is Dylan Redwine. Yeah. Okay. His father's name is Mark Redwine. And the how do you spell his first name? Dylan. What's his middle name? Nicholas, Nicholas. Okay. And what's his birthday? 02/09/1986. 699. 020699? Yes, okay. Does he have any idea where he may have gone? Not according to him, no. Dylan doesn't have friends with him by Bayfield. He's got friends in Bayfield. Okay. They're calling when I get home. And when was the last time you saw him? He texted me a couple hours ago, so.
Where were you when you made the call to dispatch?
In my car,
Where were you driving?
to Durango. I should say to Bayfield. I mean, I put Durango and Bayfield together all the time, but I was driving to Bayfield.
We're going to go back to Exhibit 6 on the screen. So you had texted the defendant at 5:40 p.m. Have you heard anything from Dylan? You said you called the marshal's office. They have no record of you calling them. I called them. Is that the call that we just listened to?
Yes.
6:23 p.m. You send another text to the defendant. What does this one say? Call?
Tell me that again.
Sure, I'm sorry. 6:23, so it's 18:23. Why don't we have you come off with that?
Okay.
So on the bottom right of the screen there, it says 18:23, November 19th. You sent a text to the defendant. What does that text say?
Have you heard from him?
29. The defendant responds. What does the defendant say?
No, and I am extremely concerned at this point. I just left Tristan's house, and he has not seen him. Waiting for the sheriff to call back. I am doing all.
Okay, we'll scroll down in a minute, but who, to your knowledge, was Tristan?
Tristan was a classmate of Dylan's that lived up in Bayfield.
So this text message indicates from the defendant, I just left Tristan's house, and he has not seen him.
Yes.
.29, the text continues.
And he says, I can and will let you know the moment I hear from him.
What do you say in response to 6:35 now?
He wouldn't just leave, he would have called me. I am so suspect of you right now. How could he just disappear?
And what do you mean when you say he wouldn't just leave, he would have called me?
Objection, speculation. The exhibit speaks for itself, going back to the court's prior curative instruction to the jury regarding these issues and this exhibit.
I think this is fine. This part.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Hall. He wouldn't just, okay, I'm sorry. He wouldn't just leave, he would have called me. What do you mean by that?
Just as it says, he was very good about letting me know what he was doing, either by calling me or by text. And there were numerous occasions where, he was up in Bayfield and, would call or text me, to come get him. So I didn't think this was any different this trip or this time.
So it's suspect to you that he's now gone missing and you haven't heard.
Yes.
What does the defendant say in response at 5:44?
It's just like you to blame me. Right now, the best thing for him is finding him.
The defendant sends another text to you at 7:08. This is about 25 minutes later. And what does he say in that text message?
I just spoke with the deputy. His fishing pole is missing, and the deputy is on his way up. He asked that I search the property, which I will do now. I know.
It goes on to say what?
This is difficult, but we got to believe he is okay.
And then you send a text at 8:44 that evening. And at this point, you still haven't heard from, and no one has seen Dylan, right?
Correct.
So what do you say at 8:44 p.m.?
Obviously, I had some typos, but I said, when was the last time you talked to him?
What does the defendant say in response at 8:46 p.m.?
This morning.
8:48 p.m., you send another text to the defendant saying what, Ms. Hall?
Are you looking for him? What are you doing to find him? You seem so nonchalant that our kid is missing.
And then at 9:02 p.m. that same night, November 19th, what do you text to the defendant?
You talked to him on his cell this morning or when you left the house? Did you talk to him at all today on his cell phone?
What does the defendant say at 9:05 p.m.?
I personally spoke with this morning. The sheriff is here now. I'm doing all that I can.
Mind you, these are all text messages. She's very rightful in stating, you know, you're very nonchalant. What are you doing? He hasn't even picked up the phone to call her. He can't fully face her. He's got to do it through text messages. Coward.
Personally spoke with this morning. Looks like he's missing a him there.
Yes.
The sheriff is here now. I'm doing all that I can. I'm doing all that I can. At 9.
Is there a question there? Or is counsel just going to read the exhibit? If so, I object to that process.
I agree with you. So please ask questions.
So 9:05 p.m. he sends the text saying what?
They're here and have advised me you are on your way. There are canine units on the way. And following up on a friend I am not familiar with.
And that's at 9:43 p.m. Sorry.
Yes.
10:51 p.m. you send a response to the defendant. What do you say in that text message, Ms. Hall?
Any news? What's this friend's name?
You can have a seat, ma'am. So we've looked at some text messages that you were exchanging with the defendant. Were you calling anyone from the car and during the course of the evening?
Yes.
Who else were you making calls to?
I was making calls to people that I've known, friends in Durango, because I had to figure out where we were going to stay.
And during that evening and through the night, did you try calling Dylan?
Yes, incessantly. I called him many, many times.
What would happen when you would call Dylan?
It would go to voicemail.
Leave voicemails for him?
Yes.
You ever connect with him?
No.
How about individuals from the sheriff's office? Did you continue to call them throughout the night too?
I believe so. You know, that was kind of a chaotic night. It's looking back, it's so surreal, but I believe I did call the sheriff's office while we were driving.
And what time approximately did you arrive in the Bayfield, Durango area, Ms. Hall?
Oh, it was late. It was maybe 2:30 in the morning, I think.
Where'd you go when you arrived?
Straight to the marshal's office in Bayfield.
What was the
Mr.
reason?
Doherty, would this be a good place? I want to take another break because I don't want to go too long with the jury. But if you've got a good place in a few minutes, that'd be fine too.
I think this works perfect, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's take another break since we took one so early. We'll start up again at 10 after. Everybody rise for the jury, please.
Okay, guys, we're going to take a little recess with them. We've been going strong here for about 2 hours. I'm going to take the dogs out. You guys do what you need to do, and I will meet you right back here in just a couple moments. All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My doggies appreciate being able to go out. All right, let's continue. Let's continue. Let me get it pulled up here. We have just a little bit longer of her direct examination.
Our lazy
And
boy
then it'll go
furniture
straight
is a
into
part of the
the
family,
cross.
and it
And we
knows
may
a lot
save
about
that
us.
for
Our sofa knows
tomorrow.
all of our favorites.
We'll see.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Honor. I'm going to pick up with a couple of follow-up questions for you, okay?
Okay.
That text message you sent to the defendant saying, any news, what's this friend's name, at 10:52, November 19th, what response did you receive from the defendant to that text message?
I didn't.
And then we had talked about whether you recall making telephone calls to any member of law enforcement during the course of the night. And with the court's permission, I'd like to approach you and ask you to take a look at something and see if it refreshes your recollection, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead.
And Your Honor, I am going to object to this process. The document he's going to show the witness is a prosecution-generated summary outline of referring to several different extraction reports, I believe, contained in DA Master Media Disc 24.
Okay. Well, I'm going to overrule your objection, but I'm going to instruct you, Ms. Hall, because anything can be used to refresh memory. It really doesn't matter. However, it doesn't mean you can read this and because you've read it, that's what happened. It has to refresh your memory. And if it doesn't refresh your memory, then we're done with the issue. If it does, great. Okay?
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you. May I approach?
Please.
Thanks. Do you recall throughout the evening of November 18th and the early morning hours of November 19th making calls to law enforcement?
Yes.
That document refresh your recollection as to making calls?
Yes.
And to the best of your memory, you don't know, to the best of your memory, fair to say you called them repeatedly?
Yes.
May I approach and retrieve the document?
You may.
So you arrive in the Bayfield, Durango area around 2:30 in the morning, and you go to the marshal's office.
Yes.
What happens there?
We meet with deputy, I believe, and I can't even remember his name, and basically just inform them, of what I know, which is very little at this point. And we hang around there for a little while, and then we go to my friend's house, who is where we are staying while we're here.
What friend was that?
Amber Harrison.
And Ms. Harrison also served as your attorney in the divorce proceeding at some point, right?
Yes.
And did you stay overnight with Ms. Harrison?
We stayed with her the whole time. We were here in Durango looking for Dylan.
Approximately how long did you sleep that night after you arrived in the Bayfield, Durango area?
I don't think I did sleep.
What was the reason for that, Ms. Hall?
Relevance.
I think it's okay. Go ahead.
I was stressed out because I didn't know where my son was.
And in the days and weeks ahead, what types of efforts did you, as Dylan's mother, engage in to try to find Dylan?
Everything I knew. I mean, we had driven up to Vicedo, standing in the middle of the road, just calling his name. I mean, we did foot searches with just my immediate family around Lemon, around Durango, everywhere up there. Then I had a really good friend of mine who worked for, at the time, the Pine River Times, and she started organizing searches and grids and things like that, and I just basically followed her lead because she was really organized.
You say followed her lead. Did you participate in those searches?
Yes.
You also meet with investigators?
Yes.
How frequently were you meeting with investigators during that time period?
As often as they would meet with me. I mean, I bugged them.
What?
I bugged them.
Bugged them. I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay. When you say you bugged them, what do you mean by that?
It meant that I was calling, or I would just show up at the sheriff's office in Bodo and just show up, see if they had any answers, find out what they were doing. We went to the search and rescue and were there for a while, and I mean, just anybody who could help me, I was knocking on the door.
And as the weeks and months went by after November 12th, what was going on for you during that time? After November 18th, 2012.
I mean, I was frantic. Like I said earlier, it was so surreal. You don't expect anything like this to happen to you. And, you know, I figured he was safe because he was with his dad, and I was devastated that no one knew where my son was.
Sleep better this summer when you shop the Memorial Day event at the Revive Sleep Center inside Living Spaces. Get the hottest deals.
My heart just, I will say it and say it and say it and say it. My heart just goes out to her so much. She, you know, she's right up there with Al Stout. She is doing everything in her power. She's contacting investigators. They said, how often would you meet with them? As often as they would meet with me, as much as they would talk to me. And Mark did nothing. He didn't participate in searches. I think there was one small one. He did nothing. All that's going to come out here later on in the trial, but it's just, oh, it's so sad.
And were you aware from your conversations with law enforcement during this time that different tips and leads were coming in, they were investigating those?
Yes, I knew there were different tips and leads. They didn't necessarily tell me what they were, but yes, I knew that things were coming in.
And when you were out and about, is it fair to say you were just hoping to see Dylan or find Dylan wherever you were?
Yes.
In addition to what you've already shared with the jury about your attempts to locate Dylan, did you also speak with the media during that time to try to generate attention and help in finding Dylan?
Yes.
That include going on the Dr. Phil show?
Yes.
I'm going to direct your attention now to June of 2013. There was a search that took place up on Middle Mountain. Do you recall that?
Yes.
What do you recall about that?
I remember, you know, the search was organized. We had a bunch of people from even out of state coming up to do a grid search is what they called it. And they were focusing primarily on Middle Mountain because Middle Mountain had been reopened. And I didn't go up on the mountain. I was staying at a place at the lake.
Lake?
Bayfield Lake.
And what was the reason you were staying in Bayfield at that time?
I really was trying to stay away from media at this point because I was trying to gather my thoughts. You know, of course, we didn't know anything at this time when they were searching. But I didn't really want to, honestly, I didn't really want to find anything of my son when I was up there. So I made the decision to just not go.
You were staying in the area to be close to the search?
Yes.
And at that time, had you provided law enforcement with different pieces of belongings of Dylan?
Yes.
What was the reason you provided them to law enforcement?
Because according to Mark, he didn't have anything with Dylan's scent on it, and the sheriff's office said they needed something with Dylan's scent on it for the dog.
So you were aware that the law enforcement investigators were seeking belongings of Dylan's?
Yes.
They had not received any from the defense?
Yes.
What did you provide to law enforcement to aid them in the investigation?
A bag of clothes, pillow, blanket. I can't recall specifically, but those articles.
Where did you take those from?
My house and monument. And actually, it wasn't me that gathered those. It was my stepdaughter who gathered them, and then we met in Alamosa to get those items.
Did you recognize those to be Dylan's?
Yes.
And I should ask, during that time when Dylan was missing, what did you do with his bedroom and belongings?
Well, we were here for a while, so obviously nothing. And, you know, I left the room as it was for a while. We had just moved a monument, so, you know, it wasn't, I mean, he was getting unpacked and organized and such. So.
The items that were collected that you recognized as Dylan's were then provided to law enforcement?
Yes.
All right, can I have one moment?
You may.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Can you take a look at what's been marked as People's 10 for identification, please?
Yeah, Dylan's hat.
How do you recognize it to be Dylan's hat?
Because he wore it, and I mean,
This
That's a hat that was provided to law enforcement to assist them with the investigation, including the work with the dogs.
Yes.
That hat appear to be in the same or similar condition as the one that was provided to law enforcement. At this time, people move People's 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection. Anticipating chain of custody to be tied up later on.
Well,
I understand that.
recognizes it as Dylan's hat. I don't see it being a chain issue.
Rod, correct.
Okay, so it's admitted.
Your Honor, may I approach with what's been marked as People's 11 for identification?
Yes.
What is in People's 11 for identification, Ms. Hall?
Chapstick.
Is that a chapstick that belonged to Dylan?
Yeah.
Provide that to law enforcement as well to aid them in their investigation?
Yes.
That chapstick appear to be in the same or similar condition as to when you provided it to law enforcement?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, people move People's 11 into evidence.
No objection. It's admitted.
Ms. Hall, you mentioned providing law enforcement with a pillowcase and clothing that belonged to your son Dylan, aid them in the investigation, including the work with the dogs. With court's permission, I'm going to approach and show you what's been marked as People's 13 for identification.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I open the bag and
Is it all on one exhibit?
Yeah,
sure. Okay. You can. We just need to make sure it gets sealed back up. And make sure you speak up so people can hear you. Or take the microphone.
Okay. Paul, this bag, when was the last time you've seen this in this bag?
Since we gave it to law enforcement?
Yeah.
I haven't. I mean, I saw it just briefly today.
So you saw it briefly today before coming up to the building?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to look inside?
Yes.
And what's inside Exhibit 13 for identification?
Dylan's clothes and pillow, and a blanket. I think that's it.
And the items that are in there that you provided to law enforcement to assist with the investigation appear to be in the same or similar condition as you provided them back in 2012.
Yes.
At this time, you could move to the 13 evidence.
No objection. 13's in.
Paul, I have one item within Exhibit 13 in my hands. What is this?
Dylan's pillow.
And how do you recognize these Dylan's pillow?
Because I bought him that sheet set when we moved to the new place. I'm sorry. When we moved into our new place.
Okay, hold on just a second. Paul, you need to speak up.
Thank you, Your Honor. And this was one of the items you provided to law enforcement to assist with the investigation.
Yes.
That they could locate yours.
Yes.
First judge regarding this procedure.
So you see better? As long as you're out of everybody's...
It's not about what I can see. It's about wearing gloves for counsel.
Oh, approach here.
That's the question I was going to ask.
Okay.
What are the rules of engagement to handle physical evidence such as this?
Well, if there's no gloves and nobody's wearing them, I mean, if there's future issues about this, I think the prosecution has pretty much waived any problems, right?
Difficult for me to see.
Why don't you come up?
Thank you. That's a hard question.
A mic doesn't see problems, only opportunities. The world needs more mics.
How long does Juvederm lip filler last? Juvederm lip results last up to 1 year with
Go ahead. I'm just going to take out one other item here, Ms. Hall. What am I holding in my hands here? It's blue and orange.
It's actually red, and it's his Red Sox blanket. He was a big fan of the Boston Red Sox. Oh, that's the Bronco one. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Bronco fans everywhere. Bronco's blanket.
It is.
And there are other items of clothing that belong to Dylan Redwine in Exhibit 13, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to pull each and every one out, but these are all the items that provided to law enforcement. Aid in the investigation, particularly with regard to
Yes.
Your Honor, just for the record, we had it unsealed for presentation of evidence in this hall, and I'll have it sealed back up and available.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Hall, did you also provide an item to aid law enforcement with DNA testing in the event remains were found? I can ask that a different way, I'm sorry. Did you also provide other items to law enforcement to aid them if DNA testing was conducted?
I'm sure I did. I can't remember specifically what it was. I mean, I know we gave DNA. I gave DNA.
And what was the reason you gave DNA?
In case remains were found so they could identify the match. I'm not sure how all that works, but they asked for it and I gave it.
And with regards to that search on Middle Mountain, at some point were you made aware that items that your son's remains were recovered?
Yes.
How and when did you receive that information?
I can't remember the specific day. I think it was the 20. Various items were found throughout the week, starting on the 20th of June, I believe. And the first item they had found was Dylan's shoe. And that's when I was told that they found Dylan's shoe. We had to identify it as Dylan's shoe.
What was the process? How did you end up being able to identify the shoe?
They brought it to me.
How did you recognize it to be Dylan's shoe?
Because I bought them.
And what happened after that in the days that followed?
They were still searching, and then they found remains, human remains.
At some point thereafter, were you informed about DNA testing on the remains?
Yes.
What were you informed?
That they were sending them off to, I believe it was CBI. They didn't know how long it would take, but CBI was going to do a rush on it. And then it was shortly thereafter that I got the official notice that those were Dylan's remains.
Where were you when you got the official notice?
I was at our cabin in Bayfield that we were staying at.
Your Honor, I have nothing further from Ms. Hall. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Cross? Yes, please.
And Ms. Hall, if you can't hear me or if I muddle a question, please let the judge know and I'll.
Okay. He went missing in November. Remains were found in June. And when she was notified, she was still in the Vallecito area because that was her baby and she had lost her baby. And if this does this to me again, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why this happens.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
I want to revisit some of the topics you spoke about on direct.
Okay, this is actually right where the prosecution says, I'm done, and the defense takes over. We're going to go ahead and end it there so that we can get a good, I want the whole chunk all at once. I appreciate you guys for being here so much with me. Take a moment to share this live with somebody. Tell somebody the story about Dylan. He was a precious young man that lost his life way too early at the hands of a monster that he called Dad. And it's just a really sad case. My heart breaks for Elaine Hall, for this mom. You guys are wonderful. I appreciate all of your love and support. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.